Hello, we are in Module 14 for Consumer Problems in Clothing. We're getting really close to the end of this semester. In this module, we are still continuing with the idea that you cannot find all of this in your textbook. So you are going to have some special readings and handouts during this module. I'm going to quickly walk you through a little overview of principles, elements, and color, and how we look at these applied to clothing. You might have seen this before applied to home design or interior design, but we're going to look at this specifically with clothes. So help me get started in Module 14. Many of you have probably heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs before. You may not have thought about it from the perspective of clothing, though. I highlighted here each of those areas of Maslow's, and so you know that we start on the bottom with physiological needs. And so we think about how clothes can provide this protection from weather. It could be a coat, a hat, a scarf, gloves. It could also be other types of protection from the weather or protection from something else. Safety and security is the next one. So from harm or injury. Think about knee pads, steel-toed boots. If you work on an oil rig, you have to have specific requirements for flammability for your fabrics that people are using on that oil rig. The next one is love and acceptance. Think back to some of our previous modules in the very beginning, that need to belong and have a group that we associate with. This could be through like fashion. It could be culturally when we look at love and acceptance based on clothes. The next one is esteem, like self-esteem here, to be admired, respected, social approval. Think about the expensive brands, the logos. Sometimes people use those in order to get that feeling of respect or even admiration. Think about social media nowadays. Self-actualization, this is whenever you've reached the highest potential that you can. And we associate this with clothes in that individuality and self-expression area of clothing. That's when you've truly met kind of the top tier. Okay, so that's how we can apply Maslow's to clothing. A few key terms that you have had before, but we're going to look back over them briefly here. Style. Think about if you saw these images, these black and white images, you would probably know what these things were just based on the silhouette of it, the shape of it. Okay, so with that, a garment that has a distinctive characteristic is a style. The silhouette is the outline or outer shape of an object. Okay, I had to move my picture over just a little bit so that you could see all of these things. Whenever we're looking at communication based on our clothes, you're going to find in our last module not only color, but some of the things that we communicate with our clothing intentionally or unintentionally. When it comes to color, you can identify several types of colors that we recognize certain characteristics with. Black, we say it's elegant, sophisticated, dignified, strong, serious, or even sad. There's lots of meanings behind color. Yellow, sunny, cheerful, warm. Violet, we often associate that with UCA because that's one of our colors. It's purple. But royal, wise, dramatic are other characteristics that have been attached to that. Think about white when it comes to wedding dresses. That's typically often the case because of pure. Okay. Gold, wealth, power, luxury. Consider and think about for certain events, certain activities, we see as a society, culturally, we steer away from wearing certain colors to certain events, or we encourage people to wear certain colors to them. I'll kind of stick with the wedding theme. A lot of people find it not very appropriate to wear a white dress as an attendee to a wedding. They say that that's stealing the bride's spotlight. Okay. But we are seeing some wedding gowns not be white. We've talked about that in women's apparel. Black, we typically see that reserved for little black dresses or things like a funeral. We're starting to see kind of embracing maybe a different direction when it comes to funerals and wearing. I know that we've attended one for a good friend, and it was wear his favorite color. And so we're seeing some of that shift and change, but there's lots of those cues that we could kind of pick up on with basing our clothing on color. So kind of speaking of color, we're going to quickly go through a few of the different color themes that we can look at. And so hue is the name given to a color. Value is either the lightness or the darkness of that hue. A tint, we add white to a hue, so a pastel would be an example of that. If we are shading, we're adding black to a hue. And the intensity is the brightness or the dullness of a hue. So in here, this is the full color wheel that we're looking at. There are 12 hues in this spectrum. They are divided into 3 categories. So primary colors, so red, blue, and yellow, you're probably familiar with those. These colors cannot be combined from mixing any other colors together. So these are our foundation we'll start with. Secondary colors, these are colors that are made by combining equal amounts of 2 primary colors. So green, violet, and orange. I could test you if we were in person together and ask you, how do we get orange? How do we get green? How do we get violet? And so if you think back, you're mixing 2 of these colors to get these. You've probably done that in school. And then the third one is intermediate or tertiary. These are combined with equal amounts of primary and secondary color. So you name them by the primary color first. Yellow, green, blue, violet, red, orange, and yellow, orange. Now, what about some color schemes? Okay, we're going to look at a handful of these, and I've got some pictures to complement them. Monochromatic is everything is one color. Now, there can be tints and shades of that one color, as you see in the top right-hand picture here, but everything is all blue. It's just tinted or shaded. Analogous, these are colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. So if you look, you've got, it could be the opposite side of the color wheel. This is just an example here of the colors. It does not always have to be blue, greens, yellows. It could be the opposite side, but colors that are adjacent to one another on the color wheel. Complementary, these are directly across from each other. So on that polka dot dress that I've got a little note about, pink is a tint of red and lime green is a tint of green because white has been added to the color. So we may see like blue and orange, green and red, violet and yellow. Those would be complementary color schemes. A split complementary is going to be a color scheme that uses one color with 2 colors on either side of its complement. So you've got red and green are complementary. So you come across from red and you've got blue, green, and blue, yellow. So that's going to be a split complementary. Same thing can happen with any of the other colors. That's just how you identify that color scheme. A triad, this is a scheme that's going to use 3 colors that are an equal distance apart. So if you're looking at blue, there's 3 colors before you get to red, 3 colors before you get to yellow, 3 colors before you get back to blue. These primary colors that we're seeing here, those are a triad. Now let's briefly look at some of the elements of design. Color, line, shape, form, and texture. So colors and lines, these can be used to create optical illusions, to either make a part of the body look thinner, to make the person look taller, depending on the type of line that is used and where it's placed, how close together it's placed. So I've got a little optical illusion piece that I've plugged into some of our readings that you'll be able to look at when it comes to lines. Looking at curved versus diagonal lines. So curved lines, these are more gentle. They do provide an appearance that is soft or full. Diagonal lines are a little bit different depending on what we're looking at here. The dress, those lines are diagonally down her body. So it's creating a visual that draws your eye from the top of the shoulder down to the bottom of that hem. With the curved lines around the neckline, we have to sometimes be careful if we do have, I have puffier cheeks just naturally. And so if I wear something that is curved around my cheeks, then it's going to make me appear fuller in my face. If I wear something that is a V-neck, like in this coat even, It draws the eye down and it makes my face look a little bit slimmer. That's not a huge deal to me. I think it's important for us to wear what we want to wear and feel confident in, but it is something to note that if you're going to be on television or do a presentation or something that you might just personally want to be aware of. So what about warm and cool colors? Warm colors are reds, orange, yellows, those types of colors. Cool colors are going to be on the opposite side. You've got blues, greens, and violets. And then if you are interested in a little bit of color fun, there is something called Color Me Beautiful, where you will be identified as either a fall, spring, summer, or winter. And based on that information, like the original concept of this was that you would come into a department store barefaced. They had lights set up with these little sashes that they would put against your skin, and they would identify you as either one of the seasons, and then they would tell you what colors best complement you. And so that was something that was done many years ago. We've started seeing some of that reoccur. There are people now that are doing Color Me Beautiful consults. So kind of a cool little thing if you're interested. When it comes to shape, if you look, we've got tubular, full, or bell. So tubular, things that are more vertical, no defined waist, such as a man's suit in this example. A full form would be achieved by something that's like pants with a full leg like this, like wide leg pants coming back. Bell-shaped is going to be more defined at the waist and then flare out. So if you think back to that module where we looked at those shapes, bell is one of those that's really obvious. Texture, this one's a really great one. When you're looking at this jacket in the far left-hand corner, you can tell that if you touched that, you would have a different texture from the sleeve of that jacket on the lapel and that collar there. This one in the middle here, the burgundy shirt, this is one of those that you may or may not have ever seen, but it's kind of a one-size-fits-all, and it ends up looking like the size of a doll shirt, but it's actually for grown adults. This tie is a silk, so you can tell that that texture there is going to be very smooth, it's very shiny, but it's also going to be very smooth to the touch. And then that last one is a really fun one that a student provided for texture. Now, looking at some of these guidelines for working with elements of design, again, I personally think you wear what you love and feel confident in, but these are just some of the things that I would be in trouble if I did not share with you in our principles and elements as applied to clothing. Proportion and harmony. I've got a lot of information here on this. There are several links in here that I would encourage you to click through, but there is something called the rule of thirds. And if you watch this video, it's going to share with you that you either want 1/3 on top and 2/3 on bottom, as in like a shirt and pants, or 2/3 on top and 1/3 on bottom, as in a dress. If we're looking at harmony, this is just when all pieces and elements of design come together and create that cohesive outfit. Again, I think that you do what you feel confident in and comfortable, and this is just good information to have. When it comes to emphasis and rhythm, the emphasis is obviously pretty easy to spot on this bright pink dress with the big bow on the back, the flowers on the shoulder and at the waistline of the other dress, anything that really draws the attention to that specific point on the garment. When it comes to rhythm, this could be created by actual movement of the fabric, like ruffles that you see here in this picture, or by the actual pattern on the garment. So this image that we have for rhythm for this shirt that's not ruffles creates that movement, that look by the design that they've got attached to it. Balance, this is either formal or informal, or symmetrical or asymmetrical. Basically, the way that I can remember these, if I cut them in half, is it the same on both sides or is it different on both sides? So if we look at that shirt with the flowers on it in the top left-hand corner, if I cut that in half, they would be different on each side. So that is an informal or asymmetrical design. If we're looking at the dress over here on the far right, if I cut that in half, it's going to look exactly the same on both sides. So that's formal. Lines can either be structural or decorative. On this jacket in the far left-hand corner, if I cut this The lines out of this, I'm taking the actual jacket apart. So therefore the jacket would not be sewn together anymore. If I'm looking on the far right at this shirt, this is going to be decorative. If I remove those lines, the shirt's not going to fall apart. So that's how we can identify if they're structural or decorative lines. So just to kind of wrap this up, a few pieces here. These are not to give you like an idea or a viewpoint specifically. It's just to kind of really get you to thinking. These videos are not scientifically based really. They are just videos from like BuzzFeed or something that ran across my social media. And I thought a few different people might appreciate kind of seeing some of this. So whenever you look at these, just kind of keep that in mind. One of them is about standard beauty types for men around the world. Another one is ideal body types throughout history for women. It's something you may not be familiar with, that if a woman was plump in a certain era of time, she was considered very wealthy, and that was very sought after because that meant that she had money. She was able to eat. So things like that. And then we all can appreciate, and we've probably experienced that frustration of trying on what we think is our size in different places, and it turns out that it's actually not. So this is women trying on jeans in one size, but different brands. And it kind of just highlights some of that standard industry issue when it comes to sizing. So overall, this is Module 14. I hope that you've enjoyed this, and I look forward to looking at your principles and elements of design assignment. Thank you so much.